Sometimes we get those deep dive requests, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be fascinating. But this one, Tunisian Arabic, I am so ready for this.
Yeah, this is one of those languages where if you only scratch the surface, you miss out on the good stuff. It's a culture, it's history, it's all wrapped up in this really fascinating package.
Yeah, because, even starting with the article you sent, just the debate about whether it's even a dialect or a language in itself.
Right, and that's kind of the thing, right? Because, at the surface, sure, it's part of, like, Maghrebi Arabic and that family. Right. You find it all across North Africa. But then you start to listen a little closer, and you can hear the echoes of, like, the ancient Berber languages, the Roman Empire, even a little sprinkle of Italian marketplaces.
Wait, Italian marketplaces? Now you have to explain this.
All right, so picture this, okay? You were in Tunis, you're walking through a market, you're hungry, you want a snack. You go up to a street vendor and you order a baku, which to you at that moment sounds very Tunisian. But that word is straight from the mouths of Italian traders. A twist on pacco, meaning package.
No way. So I'm literally tasting history in the language.
Right.
What other little, souvenirs do you find in the language from its past?
Oh, there are tons, actually. So imagine, you're walking down this really lively street, and they're like, yeah, this is the calles. And it's like, okay, yeah, that sounds like a word. Except it's borrowed from the Spanish word calles, which is streets. So you can practically hear these interactions that were happening.
That is so cool. I love how this language is like this map, right? You can see where people have been and where the language has traveled, but it's not just about the words, right? The article you sent me mentioned some pretty significant grammatical, quirks. I think you even used the word streamlined at one point.
Yeah, it's streamlined. Tunisian Arabic really throws out the rule book in a bunch of interesting ways.
Yeah.
For example, their verbs. They don't even bother with a separate indicative prefix, Like in English, I go versus if I go.
Right.
Like, nah, we're good. We're going to have one form that's going to do it all.
Tunisian Arabic is all about efficiency, clearly. Did they find any other, shortcuts for any other tricky verb tenses, or is that it?
Actually, yeah. So instead of conjugating everything for the future, they often will use prefixes like mash or bash or bish, and it just kind of gets slapped on the front. So instead of changing the verb, they just kind of add a little will in front of it, essentially. Yeah. So like bishnakal, I will eat.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So not only is it borrowing words, it's just finding its own ways to kind of bend the rules a little bit. And speaking of bending the rules, the article mentioned this thing called meaning shift, which I found super intriguing.
Ah, meaning shift.
What shit is that?
It's like linguistic evolution, but on fast forward. So there is this Arabic root, XDM, right? So if you were a speaker of standard Arabic, that means to serve. But Tunisia, they're like, nah, that means to work now.
Whoa. It's like the meaning of the word itself completely adapted to a new context.
Exactly. And it's just super interesting how dynamic language is and how it reflects really the needs of the speakers, the perspectives of the speakers. Or take, for example, this participle Q. Originally, it meant sitting. But Tunisian Arabic was like, no, we're going to use this to talk about things that are ongoing. So instead of saying, I am eating, it's more like, I sitting eat.
That's so cool. They reinvented the ing, but in their own way. I'm starting to see why this language is giving linguists a run for their money in the best way possible.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a fascinating one. Yeah. And these influences we're talking about, the different languages, those didn't just stop at the vocabulary. They actually worked their way into the structure of the language itself.
Okay, now you have to explain that. How do you blend the very bones of languages together?
Yeah, so it's almost like taking puzzle pieces from different boxes and making them fit. That's Tunisian Arabic.
Okay.
So for example, if you look at the question word ikun for who, it's like they took ush and kun from different linguistic ancestors, mashed them together and said, there you go. That's who now.
That's wild. It's like they took the best parts of every language and we're just going to make this incredible thing. So I love that we're talking about this in a historical context, but where does that leave Tunisian Arabic in modern day Tunisia?
Ooh, that's where things get really interesting because you can't talk about Tunisian Arabic without talking about this concept of diglossia.
Okay, you've officially hooked me on the word diglossia. What is it and what does it mean for Tunisian Arabic?
So imagine you've got two outfits, right?
Okay.
You've got your everyday outfit, something comfy, familiar. But then you've got that outfit you break out for, special occasions, a little more formal.
I like it. I gotcha.
Right. That's kind of diglossia in a nutshell. So you got modern standard Arabic, which is like the formal outfit of the language situation in Tunisia. They use that in government, education, all that kind of stuff. And then you've got Tunisian Arabic, which is like the everyday language of the streets, of the cafes, like the heart of Tunisia.
So it's like this linguistic double life. You speak one way with, friends, family, but then another way if you're in these more official settings. I can already imagine, like, the interesting dynamics that probably come from that.
Oh, absolutely. It raises all these questions about identity, about culture, even about power dynamics, right? Like
Yeah,
which language helps you get ahead, but also which language is actually a reflection of who you are.
totally. It's like there's this linguistic hierarchy at play in a way. And from what I've read, it seems like Tunisian Arabic is trying to kind of break free from some of those constraints, right? Like the article mentioned it popping up in literature and theater and music, all these really interesting places.
Yeah, there's this movement to celebrate Tunisian Arabic as this language of art, as this language of expression, as a way to really capture like the soul of Tunisian culture.
That's so cool. It's like it's reclaiming its place on the cultural stage.
Exactly. And I think this shift is especially visible like post 2011 revolution,
Okay.
where there was this sense of renewed like pride in Tunisian identity. And language plays a big part in that. You see it online, you see it in how people talk. It's like bursting with new life.
That's so fascinating. But before we get to online, I do want to hear more about like this linguistic rebellion, in the arts. So can you give me some specific examples of how Tunisian Arabic is like leaving its mark?
Oh, where do I get? I mean, let's just start with cinema. Like films like La Goulette, Halfween, Child of the Terraces. I mean, those are like not just great movies, they're like cultural touchstones.
Yeah.
And they're told authentically in like the language of the people.
Wow. It's like Tunisian cinema then is like holding up a mirror to society, but they're doing it in like a way that feels very grounded because they're using Tunisian Arabic. What about music?
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, so picture like the mournful wail of the mizwad, this like traditional Tunisian wind instrument, right?
Okay.
Often the lyrics that are steeped in Tunisian Arabic, they're telling stories of love, of loss, of like the human experience.
That's beautiful, though. I love that it's like these ancient traditions are still alive. They're still being passed down.
And it's not just about like preserving the past either. It's about like fusing it with the present.
Yeah.
Tunisian Arabic, it's thriving in like contemporary music too. Like look at raps, look at hip hop. Like it's there.
So it's this language that can bridge generations.
Exactly.
Which is so cool.
And you see this evolution in literature as well.
Yeah.
For a long time, it was modern standard Arabic. It was French that really dominated the literary scene, right? But you have this wave of authors who are embracing Tunisian Arabic as a literary language.
That's incredible. Like they're saying our stories, our voices deserve to be told in the way that we speak. Are there any authors in particular that come to mind?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So Hidi Ballet, he's like a pioneer in this movement. Not only has he translated works into Tunisian Arabic, but he's like compiled dictionaries, collections of idioms. Like he's really championing this language.
That's amazing. He's like a linguistic warrior.
Yes.
Fighting the good fight.
Exactly. And then, you've got folks like Tahar Faza. He wrote this incredible collection of short stories, Joshanat Tinsia. And it's all in Tunisian Arabic. And he's capturing these like everyday rhythms, of life in Tunisia.
It's so cool to see people like pushing those boundaries and saying, no, this is a legitimate form of expression. But I imagine there's still people who are like, well, this is just like the lesser form of.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's like the legacy of diglossia, right?
Right.
But the tide is turning, and there's a growing movement to formally recognize Tunisian Arabic as a language.
Now we're talking. What does that look like? What are some of the efforts that are being done to kind of make that a reality?
Well, there have been attempts to introduce it into the education system, particularly like in the early years.
Which makes sense, right? Like validate the language that children speak at home.
Exactly. Imagine how empowering that is for like a Tunisian child to like see their language in textbooks.
Yeah, it's like you're saying, this is important.
Exactly.
This matters. Your language matters. What are some of the challenges to that, though? Because I'm sure it's not like an easy path to get it recognized, right?
Oh, no, absolutely not. And I think one of the biggest hurdles is like this deeply ingrained belief in like the superiority of modern standard Arabic. It's seen as the pure form, the correct form, and anything that diverges from that is somehow lesser than.
Right. It's like this gatekeeping of language.
Exactly. But despite these obstacles, like this movement is gaining momentum. There's this sense of like pride. There's a desire to like reclaim the language,
Yeah.
to celebrate what makes it unique.
Yeah, it's like Tunisian Arabic is like, I am here, I am valid. And speaking of valid, I feel like we haven't even like touched on how Tunisian Arabic sounds yet, which I know you were like, get ready for the sonic journey.
I did say that, didn't I?
Okay, spill it.
Yeah.
What's this sonic journey going to be like?
So we talked about like how Tunisian Arabic is kind of a rebel, right? Like bending the rules.
Okay.
Well, that rebellious spirit
Yeah.
totally comes out in the way it sounds.
Okay, give me an example.
Okay, so think about like how we were talking about consonant clusters before.
Yeah.
Remember kata for book?
Uh-huh.
That KT at the beginning?
Yeah.
That gives it this really like snappy staccato feel.
Oh, it's like the difference between a waltz and like a tango almost.
Totally. Like
Yeah.
standard Arabic can be very like smooth, flowing, and then Tunisian Arabic is like,
It's got that energy.
yeah.
Love it.
And that's not even like the end of it, right? Like even the Q sound, that gets a makeover. So like in certain dialects, it'll shift to more of a G sound. So like qual, he said, in standard Arabic becomes like this softer gal.
Oh, I like that. It's like every region has like its own little musicality.
Exactly.
And it adds to the language.
Yeah. And then they're masters of like vowel shrinking.
Yeah.
Especially like in casual conversation. So like a word like dar for house might become like a clipped doctor.
Wow. So it's like even more efficient.
Right. Like they value every syllable.
Yeah. I love that. And all those borrowed words we talked about, I bet those add a whole other layer to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of times those words, they come with their original pronunciations, right?
Right, yeah.
So you have this like really cool blend of like accents within the language.
I love it. Like it's this linguistic melting pot.
Exactly.
Okay. We've talked about the history. We've talked about some of the grammar. We've talked about, how it sounds. But then there's also like the digital age, which for every language right now feels very much so like in flux. What's that been like for Tunisian Arabic?
I mean, it's this weird double-edged sword, right? Because on the one hand, it's given Tunisian Arabic this like global platform.
Right.
But on the other hand, there is this risk of like fragmentation.
Right, because everyone's typing it out, however.
Yeah, exactly.
Which like can be fun and it can add to the evolution, but also how do you even begin to like standardize?
Yeah, exactly. And like without a standardized writing system, it's really hard to like develop educational resources, to create dictionaries, even just to share written content in a way that's consistent.
It's like you can't build the bridge because the bricks don't fit together.
Exactly.
But I'm sure there are people who are trying to figure this out. Like, what are some of the things that people are doing to kind of preserve and celebrate and also like guide it through this new digital world?
So, I mean, there are some amazing initiatives out there. So, for example, you have the Dirja Association. They're on this like mission to standardize Tunisian Arabic. So they're developing a unified writing system. They're working on this like comprehensive dictionary, which is amazing.
It's like they're building the foundation
Yes.
so that you can build the bridge. I love that. But is there a concern that like the internet is going to dilute it?
I think it's a valid concern for sure, but I also I have faith in the resilience of language.
Okay.
Tunisian Arabic has like withstood centuries of change, of influence. It's absorbed, all of these elements from other languages.
Right, and it makes it richer for it.
Exactly.
Not to get too philosophical about this, but I feel like this whole conversation has been like, don't be afraid of the change,
Exactly.
but maybe help guide it a little bit.
Right. It's about finding that balance, like evolution versus preservation and, recognizing that language is dynamic, but also honoring those roots.
This has been incredible. Honestly, I feel like we dipped our toes in and there's so much more, but I have learned a ton.
Oh, me too. It's been a blast.
So as we kind of like wrap up this journey, this deep dive, this, foray into the world of this incredible language, what do you hope our listener walks away with? Like, what is that one thing you hope that they remember?
I think for me, it always comes back to this idea that language is never just about the words, right? It's about the stories that we tell. It's about the connections we make, the cultures that we build. And Tunisian Arabic, with like its history, with its like rebellious spirit, it's a perfect reminder of that power.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. This has been incredible. And to our listeners, we will see you on our next deep dive.